Well, hello. I'm gonna make my third video in this little series, including the introduction, if you wanna. On, let's see. I guess we'll start off with some of the races I really dig, and I'll explain why. The very first race I'm gonna dig into is gonna be a personal favorite of mine, but Gnomes. And I know there's a lot of people who really dislike the Gnomes because they feel like they're too comedic, but I feel like Gnomes fill a void that I think is a really great one. Gnomes, as far as they go for races, fill in a void of comedic value. You know, they're really great comedic relief, if you will, to a lot of campaigns and a lot of dreary lands. And so, while it might seem that they're too comedic and too funny and too silly, I guess would be the best way to describe them, I think that it's great that they're around. Especially if you use like a 5th edition variant and accept this one as being, your two primaries are the Forest Gnomes and the Rock Gnomes. What makes them really great is that you have Tinker Gnomes, or Rock Gnomes if you will, who live alongside the Dwarves and live alongside really, hardworking communities, and they fill in a void of, happiness and joy that is pretty well juxtaposed and dichotomous to the typical, mountain dwarves and hill dwarves who are very much about, earning money and building things and constructing things and, basic engineering stuff. And so while the gnomes are the best at tinkering, they're also little jokesters and little tricksters, and, they make a lot of toys. And so in a world where, in a typical medieval world that, D&D takes place in, and a lot of these fantasy games take place in, people would normally have to worry a lot about food and how they're going to see their next meal and things like that, because the world's very unforgiving and there's monsters around and stuff. The magic that they have available and a lot of the culture they have available keeps them alive. And so when there's, safety and there's a lot of comfort in the world, a reasonable amount of comfort, there's room for enjoyment and pleasure and fun. And so the Rock Gnomes seem to be one of the biggest producers of the fun. And so something interesting to throw into games is games of chance and special events and music and toys and stuff. And it just seems like Rock Gnomes are the greatest producers of this sort of thing. And so perhaps as like a quest feature, a rich noble wants to get Rock Gnome toys, for his kids, or perhaps Rock Gnomes in a certain community have a day where they give out free toys as, a gift for, I don't know, some race allowing them into their cities or something like that. And I've always seen Rock Gnomes to be, Tinker Gnomes, sort of, kind of like a World of Warcraft sort of feel to them, wearing, welding goggles and belt buckles that have, little cogs, little wheels on them and stuff. And so, kind of like a steampunk sort of feel. It adds an element of, I guess, steampunkiness to a campaign in a really tasteful and comfortable way, where I don't let them have too much technology, but I always let it have kind of like a Eberron setting sort of steampunky sort of feel where there's some technology. But then Forest Gnomes, on the other hand, fill in a role of like your leprechauns and your sprites and your little, the brownies and things like that, where they are nature's tricksters, so something I like to do with them is I like to have them be very mysterious and at the same time very scary to the common folk. I mean, a lumberjack sees this as something to be, scared of, illusions in the woods, voices in the woods, giggles and things like that. And because they're, I guess I would say more sinister form of humor that they get, just because they like to play more pranks on people than just tell jokes, I imagine, it makes sense that, the common folk like farmers and lumberjacks and things like that, woodsmen, would find them to be a little bit more scary. Humans particularly would be wary of these creatures. And while they think it's hilarious, I mean, humans and their other races would be, scared to cross paths because they don't understand the creepy magic, But they fill in an interesting void where there are pleasant people who, not to, embrace cliches, but they live in like little mushroom huts and, live alongside animals and have pet badgers and ride badgers like mounts and things because they're absolutely tiny. I think that they fit in a nice void as well, and so I'm willing to say that they're one of my favorite races. I feel gnome wizards are really interesting because they cast a lot of spells just for the fun of it. They take a lot of cantrips and things that are more boomy, like fireworks stuff, just because it's more interesting and more fun. And so in a group, you can play a really tasteful character, or you can have really tasteful NPCs who are gnomes like that. Because, and this is for rock gnomes in particular, but I've always seen them to be somewhat of the best friends a character could have, because they embrace the laws and the bonds that a lot of dwarves uphold with honor and respect, but I think that they also bring a level of, like, friendliness that a lot of halflings have, and a lot of jokes that gnomes have inherently. So, I mean, they almost remind me of, like, Samwise Gamgee, characters who tell a couple jokes, have a lot of smiles, and they're really respectful and really kind to their friends, because they know friends are hard to come by. And so I'm willing to say that gnomes are probably my favorite of all favorites, but being me and like any other fantasy fan, it's pretty safe to say that favorites kind of change over time, especially when new characters become your new favorites. But if you have anything you want to add to that, or if you have very strong disagreements, which I know a lot of people do towards gnomes in particular, go ahead and leave a comment, and I guess tell me what you think about it. I'm thinking in the next video I'm going to talk about half-orcs in particular, so be ready for that one. Keep rolling 20s.